usually very loud. We have an engineer on the back of the train. The normal disposition would be called a brakeman. He's kind of in charge of the train. He's the eyes. So whichever direction the train is moving, they're sort of in charge. He has a hand brake. There, his right hand's actually on the brake right now. If this was nighttime, he'd have one hand on the flashlight, scanning, one hand on the air brake, and one hand on the radio. Be multitask. So this is normally what we'd be doing at the end of the night, is to put away. This is Chris, actually the ride supervisor for the train. The bell is ringing. The standard routine, the backup procedure is while the train is in reverse until the train is into the car barn, so it's blocked the path. We keep ringing the bell.
Bye, Steve.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
He'll be back. What's in the shed? What we were doing is, because of the potential of rain, we went through some extra efforts, came in early to take the train on an operational test run. So if it was raining, we'd have a plan B prepared for you, which would involve the cover of the station and maybe getting on the train and coming back that way. The benefit of this is we can accommodate more people, because if you can imagine, a car and a half worth of people would have prime viewing, and the rest would be investigating the car barn. And the reason why we do that, I'll jump in. Historically, we were not allowed to do tours of the engine house, because as you might gather by some of the stuff on me, it's a greasy, oily, and graphite, which is what this is. Have you ever seen any of us, while you're on the train, out on the track with that can? That's liquid graphite. The powdered version, I believe, they used to put on the bumping cars on the floor. It's sort of slippery. This is the liquid version. It cuts down squealing. Anyway, once it gets on your clothes, it doesn't come out. So for safety and insurance reasons, yes, we're not allowed in there. But we stole something from Disney. I probably shouldn't have said that out loud, which is on their tour. They put guests on the train and back it into the engine house. So when car up around us, I saw that. I tried that too. They're going to shut down the engine and turn off the compressor, fill the fire. Yeah, we're totally quiet. You got nothing. Kill it. Yeah. Through a number of inspections, more than the other rides actually. The other rides have a Department of Agriculture, just the way the state aligned everything, inspectors. We, because we have a boiler, also inspected by the Commerce Department that does elevators and boilers, interestingly enough. And they can inspect up to 2 times a year. Once when the boiler is cold, so that the inspection holes are open. We're doing this on the fly. When they can inspect the tubes and the surfaces on the inside, and then again when it's hot, so they can check that all the pressure fittings hold and that sort of thing. When you're up in green later in the season, we still have a place you can look up there, and there's a certificate that shows that state inspection. Okay, now that we're sort of in position here, okay, let me jump to this. Anybody recognize this person? Almost right time frame. It's the right decade. Dick Van Dyke, yes. So, picture, this was the green engine. Does that look familiar? Anybody? Well, it would if you were in Virginia in particular, because if you were to go to YouTube, and usually people do when I'm talking this, because you just barely have Wi-Fi connectivity out here where you are. If if you typed in 1978 King's Dominion commercial #2, you will have Dick Van Dyke in our green engine with Lou Brown as the engineer, pretending it was King's Dominion. The King's Dominion engines were different colors. They were copies of ours, but they were different colors. So, I'll put this up. On some of these, I've got a little, one of those cue things. So, if you were to take a picture of that, it would probably jump to it, but usually it's King's Dominion 1978 commercial #2, usually goes right to it. So, leading into that, this is from 2014, Stars of Kings Island. Cincinnati Enquirer. We have a number of these stars that were from the train. You have a little bit of myself to play into that. First time we've had a microphone of this version. And I'm not normally talking like this to a crowd. I was here in the 70s. My first weekend after I turned 16, I was a conductor on the train. It wasn't my intent. I was into canoes, and I was hired to be on the war canoes, which you probably have seen in Brady Bunch for those who weren't around here in the 70s. So I was a canoeist, but I never made it there on my first day. So I had 7 years as a high school and college on the train, and I was going to a business college. But as you stand in the station, or as the train went by, if you look under the engine, all the things moving and all the eccentrics, as things are eccentric, that's train steam engines have eccentrics. I wanted to know how that worked. So in college, I transferred from business to engineering and became an engineer of the classic, went on to become a professional engineer and had a career of 36 years in the Air Force, dealing with aircraft, jet engines, aircraft, that sort of thing. Near the end of that, I came back when my daughter started working here. My girlfriend, later wife, also worked here when I worked here, and wife of now 40 years. So this is my thing. I thank her for her patience for putting up with me. So this is actually my 25th year on the train, most of which were part-time weekends because I was working as an engineer of the Air Force. I was, the last 12 years of that or so, I was working here on weekends. So this is 25th year, and that is by no means the longest engineer that's been on here. You can turn around, you see a name right there in that sort of doorway. It says Sam Jasper, MD. He was actually a math doctorate, taught a professor at Ohio University. And he was a third-generation railroader, so in the summers, he moved to Lebanon or somewhere around the area. As he put it, in the winter, he trained mines. In the summer, he minded trains. But he was a math professor, and he was actually one of the reasons why I became interested in engineering and switched to engineering and came back, because there's a history of people coming through, the students getting interested in this and pursuing this. For instance, Ty right here and Chris are both in engineering, applied engineering college right now. Supervisor before them is in Miami, I think it is, engineering college. So a lot of people that come through get hooked on engineering because of this. What's in front of you represents many decades of science, math, experimentation, accidents, and learning. Empirical engineering, some people call it. Oops, that didn't work. Let's get a new person and try something else. So this is a representation of the 1800s, some of the best math and science around the world, in the sense of boilers and engines in general. It was part of what created the Industrial Revolution and America, crossing America. For those of you who are train fans know that a week or so ago was the anniversary of the Transcontinental railroad connecting. And next year, I think was it 150, or it's a big number for that anniversary. So they're going to reenact that out there at Promontory Point, just to the other side of Agunito. So, but the stars of, so all that to say, I was with a lot of these people, so this is firsthand. What I have to say, some of it is firsthand recollection, some of it is talking with others who have credible sources, such as Dennis Spiegel. I'm not sure if he was here this year, but a couple of years ago he was here, the year before that. And he was in the park here between here and King's Dominion, and I double-checked a lot of these with him, and he confirmed. So, Dennis Patrick, does that name sound familiar? To let me shuffle here. Okay, here we go, we're getting close. Some CBS sports announcer, Dan Patrick. Yes, Dan Patrick. So in the 70s, early 70s, the train was part of the live shows. The Heritage Theater was not built yet. The big theater was the Bubble Theater over by the Eiffel Tower, the positive air blow up kind of a theater that existed until a heavy snow load one winter. It came down, hit the light supports, ripped it, and that was saying the end of that, let's build a building. So during those time frames, this was part of live shows. So we had a lot of people on this. Dan was politically incorrect. I don't think there's a hashtag for that. He was an Indian attacking the train. He's a graduate of Mason High School, across I-71 over there. So he's one of our alumni. Janine Coyle, for locals, may recognize from Married with Microphones. WGRR 103.5. She was one of the actors on the train, so I knew them. Some of the more people that were from the train, Vicki Lewis from How I Met Your Mother, News Radio, Rugrats, Seinfeld, and Finding Nemo. She was also in the train crew during that time frame. Susan Perkins, another lady actor on here, she became Miss Ohio, and in 1978 was Miss America. She was a member of our train. Not a member of our train, but someone I saw frequently over by Diamondback. When you come out, there used to be a wood shop over there where you could carve in your name with a router, put it up on your house or something. Woody Harrelson worked there, according to my wife. She thinks that's where he got the name Woody, was from working in the wood shop. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm not going to contradict my wife. Let's see. So those are the big ones that were from. Nick Lachey was in the park. Carmen Electra, of course, by a different name, was in the park. While we're at it, in the that time frame, these are two maps, one of then and one of now, on the railroad track. So we used to go the path of the Lazy River. We used to go up the hill, make a sharp horseshoe, came back down basically the path of the Lazy River. I believe they probably put the Lazy River there because it was already graded and well packed from the train going over it for all that time. So we went from a little over, I used to say a mile and a half, some sources say 1.1 miles, somewhere in that range, to about a mile. While we lost that, we gained going out towards the parking lot and coming around the house, which many of you have probably seen Mythbusters, saying it's haunted, the girl in the little blue dress. I have never seen a spotting of the little blue girl in the little blue dress out there. But that's a part of the history. So more into people. This is one I put together years ago when it was an ACE tour, our strategy for those in back. This is a list of roller coasters, and I asked what's common about them. And Wood is usually the first thing I hear. Kurt Summers is usually the second thing I hear. So for those of you who know, Kurt Summers was a roller coaster designer following the John Miller era, although he worked with John Miller. For those who've, I believe it's still at the Bees, seen this placard, this Ace placard, his name's on there as technical specs design of the coming out of the station with the cable helix. I think he was also involved in the cables. He was a civil engineer by trade and actually laid out Kings Island to a large degree and Kings Dominion even more. So the connection, you're probably wondering, is as a civil engineer, and I ran this by Jeff Gramke a few years ago, and he couldn't say it wasn't true, but as a professional engineer, he'd be involved in the signing off and stamping of plans and whatnot. So he was involved in the train, nothing else, the trestle, which had to be signed off by an industrial engineer as well as the layout. So what I tell people that our Acer connection is that once they ride the train, they have been on the flattest roller coaster ever designed by Kurt Summers. We do have a 1.5% grade hill, which if you could hear the train this morning as we were walking, as it was going around, it was spinning. Starts over here in the morning and dew collects over there. It was spinning. So if you can imagine steel tires, steel welded radials, steel tires on a steel rail with water, oil, and grease mixed in, and you're going uphill. We're sort of defying gravity. So that's fun the first few trips in the morning. Anyway, the side thing that I personally know follow this story is he was local. His son and I were in the same Boy Scout patrol when I grew up in Boy Scouts. So he was one of the assistant scoutmasters of our troop. So I had sort of a neat connection. It was one of those things you don't really appreciate the connection you have as a kid until later in life. And for those who want to know, and you might want to ask your speaker later today, what would a roller coaster designer have in their basement? I can tell you from experience, the answer for him is pinball machines. I was hoping for skee-ball when I was over, but he had pinball machines. That's my favorite. So that's the Ace connection for a train. I also believe Don is a fan of trains. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. This is a sort of cut and paste version of an article from 2015, July 5th, that opened my eyes to the actual history of this train and what it represents. Well, I was told by Don that a lady was going to come over and take some pictures and interview. It was Rachel Richardson at the time with the Cincinnati Enquirer. And I told her as we're walking down through here, I was trying to put myself in the mood, pretend you're going back 150 years in time. And she corrected me on the number of years it was. It turns out that these engines have a connection to Warren County and Lebanon through the Civil War Great Locomotive chase. These are roughly 2/3 scale replicas of the General from the Civil War. The General was the train that you may recall was Andrews Raiders, April in 1862. Went down undercover, so to speak, civilian uniform, civilian outfits, down to Big Shanty near Kennesaw, Georgia. This is the first year, almost the 1-year anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War, and came in small groups and converged on the station there. As the train had come in, everybody got off the train once it had been reloaded with water and wood. The crew and everybody went in and got breakfast. And while they were eating breakfast, these 20 so Union scouts and soldiers snuck on the train and stole the train and took off with the train. Started heading north with the plan of stealing the train, destroying track and communications, teletype wires as they were going along. The conductor of the train gave chase, start initially with a handcart, and then they finally got to the Texas steam locomotive, which was a little smaller and actually very close to this size, and chased it backwards. A steam locomotive can go generally as fast backwards as it can go forwards. So it chased it backwards about 87 miles before literally the general ran out of steam. You're going to hear lots of phrases that you probably use in real life that came from railroads. One of them is running out of steam. So they were caught. James Andrew and a few of the others were executed as spies because they were not in uniform. They were considered spies. They were executed. Some of the others were in a prisoner swap and came back and received the first ever Congressional Medals of Honor. The key there for us here is it was an Ohio regiment from Warren County, and it was organized by a local member of this. Let me look real fast. Here we go. Mitchell. So many things going through my mind getting ready for this. Everyone know Fort Mitchell across the river in Kentucky? Well, Ormsby Mitchell was born over there, but quickly moved to Lebanon and grew up in Lebanon, became a brigadier general in the Union, and he and James Andrew formed the Great Train Chase. It was initially Mitchell's Raiders, became the Andrews Raiders. So this train is a representation of the general, and we had a Warren County connection, which I hadn't realized that strong a connection. Ironically, for those who know the formation of Kings Island and the history of Fess Parker, 2 movies were made out of the general. One, Buster Keaton, I believe, Keaton about 1927, 26. And Disney made a probably more famous one around 1956, and the star of that was Fess Parker. For those who know the Kings Island history, Fess Parker was looking at building a park on the other side of the river in Kentucky, and that's part of what drove the ownership of Coney Island to accelerate plans and try to do some financial interactions interfering with Fess Parker and his park to build Kings Island. So I've never heard this from anybody else, but I'm going to offer that Kings Island, not only did they try to shut down Fess Parker, they shut him down using one of the engine that he became in the movie for. There were lots of different engines that Crown Metal, as you see in the nameplate over here, could have replicated it. The Jupiter from the Promontory Point, 119. If you've been to any Busch Gardens parks, you will see lots of other crowns that look African, European, British. Generally the same basic frame underneath, but the cowcatcher can be swapped out for a snowplow if you're over Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. So there's lots of interesting connections, and I would offer, if you wanted to learn more about the Civil War and the connection there, do a Google. I did it last night. I worked to say Cincinnati Enquirer, July 5th, 2015, Kings Island. It's probably going to pop up there. She has a Cincinnati Enquirer version. She has another article out there, you can probably hunt for it. It's got some more information about it in the train. So we add this over here as part of the background. This is another picture of Lou Brown, an article when the park was opened in 1972. If you did the Dyke and Dyke commercial, you'd see him in that commercial. These 2 engines were initially named the Simon Kenton, which was the green one, and Tecumseh, one explorer, one Indian local. But a few years after the passing away of both Kenny and Lou, who I worked with both, they were renamed. It wasn't just happenstance, because those were the first 2 engineers. Lou Brown started when he was 18, 19 as a fireman for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Got steam experience there. He later gained a steam engineer, power engineer license. Worked for a national bread company, worked for a park on the side in steam, and was a steam fan, owned an old fire engine, steam fire engine pulled by horses. and would compete it against diesel pumpers. And the story he would tell is if it was the unlimited warm-up, he always beat the steamer fire engine, could pump further than a modern diesel-based fire engine. But if they had to start from cold and had only like 5 minutes to warm up, he didn't have a chance. But if he was allowed to warm up, he would always beat them. The key here is Kenny and Lou specified the engines. So they weren't just basic crown. So if you bought a house and you look at a market spec house, the basic frame is there. But if you look at green, you can see the number of domes. There's 3 domes. By comparison, on the blue engine, there's 2 steam domes. This one in the middle, or the only one, the one in front on here, is a sand dome. The middle one on green is a sand dome, and it's fluted. Whenever Crown sent 2 engines to a park, they would make some differences between them. One would have 2 steam domes, one would have 3, and when it had 3, the middle one was fluted. So if you see the steam dome over there, it's got flutes on it, which is indicative of the Rogers brand steam locomotives, of which the General was, and green fits in with that. And the other ones are called Crown, and they're one's convex, one's concave, and one has flutes and one doesn't. Also, the windows are different. So Lou picked the arched roof, arched windows, and Kenny picked the gabled roof and more Gothic windows, I think he referred to it. The valves were different initially. So if you looked up in the engine, the handles were dramatically different as picked by the engineer. So those were different right up front. But I was doing some counting last night. There's been about 20 modifications to these engines from when they were originally delivered. Of the original 5 that were purchased by Taft Broadcasting in the 70s, these are the only 2 left within the now Cedar Fair / Paramount Taft lineage. These were the first 2. Blue was built in 72 for the park to open in 72. Green was built in 71 in the fall for the park to open. Lou was the superintendent of the railroad, so whenever they tinkered with something, they started with Lou. Then they would, from what they learned, do Kenny's. So if you're used to listening to us chugging up the hill, Lou barks better. That initially didn't happen. It's a pipe that comes out of the exhaust cylinders. Each one converges into a vertical pipe that shoots through a gap up into the smokestack. They tried different nozzles on top of that pipe to create a bark sound. So that's one reason why Blue barks better, is that it had more experimentation on that. Well, so those are some of the difference. Green one started with the diamond-shaped stack. That is indicative of a wood burner. As the wood cinders would come up, there were veins in there, like you might have in a jet engine, that force the air into a circular pattern and force the cinders and wood, well, that was still burning, if any, off to the side, where it would then fall down into a stream kind of a thing. The coal burners were straight shots up, generally, of the stacks. The original General was built light green with a diamond shape. Towards the end of the Civil War, marched to the sea, a lot of things got burnt. The General got partially burnt and was rebuilt from a wood burner to a coal burner. So in a sense, both these 2 engines represent the General before and after, when it was a wood burner and was a coal burner. I don't think that was the plan, the way this worked out, but it fits in with the story. But we had to do a number of modifications, not me personally, but Sam Jasper, Sam Lou, and another gentleman by the name of Bob Maynard. If there's any live steamers in the group here that have the small kind of things like Disney had in his backyard? Bob Maynard was a key person in the area who formed a lot of the steam clubs around here. He was a mechanical engineer and he built things with these engines. That without those modifications, up to 20 of which, these would probably be long gone, as was the case with King's Dominion. It used to be you'd put in the propane in the morning and it was summer, 6 hours later you ran out of gas, literally. Part of that phenomenon though is it could be hot out and there's now frost around the outside of the propane tanks. Ever use like a compressed air can to clean out the back of a computer? Spray it for a few seconds, you get that evaporative cooling thing going on. Well, imagine the liquid propane converting to the gas that we burn all day long. We might be going through 50, 75 gallons a day in each one of those tanks. It's hot out and I'm seeing build up ice on these things. That's the way they were delivered from Crown. So Kings Island put insulation across the top, put a small fortune in copper tubing, ran steam heat off the manifold in the engine through the hose right here, back up into there. So middle of the day, if you look up there and you say, why is there steam coming out of the tender? It's because there is steam coming out of the tender. We are heating up the propane tanks so the shell stays at a temperature that the liquid propane will convert and keep the ice off. The burners are dramatically different. Anyone here ever been to Worlds of Fun? Go up to the engine, Eli, look inside the cab. That has the original burner. You can't see it here because it's now vertical underneath the piping and tubing to bring the air, fuel mixture. It used to be in the cab, sitting between the fireman and the engineer. The burner, about a 6-inch gap, pure flame, about 6 inches in diameter, going through a hole in the fire door. That's the way it was designed by Crown. Very loud, like a jet engine, very hot. They got some H-shaped burners, industrial burners, put them inside the fire box, and that helped reduce the fuel consumption, increase the relative quietness of the engine. You know, took it down from maybe 3 digits decibel to 2 digits decibel, and helped preserve it. Another thing that we've done is the drainage. We take some water off the top of the boiler where scum and whatnot tends to develop. If you imagine, we go through, that's 1,200 gallons of water in the back of the tender. Every 2 hours, we're probably putting 300 to 500 gallons in. When you make steam, steam comes out pure, so everything that was in the water is left behind. So you get stuff left in the boiler. Some of it floats on top, some of it goes down to the bottom. It's called the mud ring that you blow out in the morning. We skim the top through the piping and run it down to what's called a concentric heater to heat up the water going into the boiler. So the hotter you can make the water going in the boiler short of boiling temperature, the more efficient it'll be. So we now have a pump on the other side, which didn't come with the original Crown. If everyone been here to the Disney tour, you will see Disney has pumps also. Not all Crowns, very few Crowns actually have pumps. They usually use injectors, which is like a 1900 technology. We still have them today. This right here is a piece of scientific magic right there. If you think about, we are taking water that's at outside, 14.7 atmospheric pressure, and we're trying to force it past this check valve right here. And on this side of the check valve is anywhere up to 180, 190 PSI. Math just doesn't work. The injector, through some of the magical properties of steam and water, can accelerate, put energy into that water to the extent that it pushes past that check valve into the boiler. So that's the way it's designed. But we have a pump as well that's a little more efficient, doesn't use the steam, it's just mechanical. When you're moving, it's on the crosshead, it just is a displacement pump, just jams water on in there. If we did not have those primarily as saviors of propane and steam, we probably would have gone the way of King's Dominion or Carowinds. To our benefit, Waterworks opened up believe it was 88, 89 kind of time frame, somewhere in the 80s. I wasn't here then. I was here 70s and 2002 forward. That helped keep the ridership going, and some would say the train wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So we have a neat mixture of people who don't care about trains, it's just transportation, and others that this is why they buy season passes. They love the steam engine, especially if they have a fan who's in the Thomas the Train Engine sort of era. So this would be Thomas. Tell you the truth, my first day here, I probably should have gotten a guest complaint. A mom brought her son up saying, "We're here to see Thomas." I had never heard of Thomas the Tank Engine at that point. So I said the name on the side. The eyes of her, if they could have killed, I would have died 1,000 deaths right then. I went home that night, went to the local library and checked out a movie on Thomas the Tank Engine, so that wasn't part of the Kings Island training. It should be. It's not a safety thing unless it's safety from the guests who really mad at you at that point. So, some other quick things real fast about what's different about this is this contraption right here is an air compressor. Underneath the sheet metal, you can see it's what's called a WABCO. It's a George Westinghouse Air Brake Company. So while the engine is 1855 design, the Great Train Chase was 1862, so when the General was built, we're cheating because the air compressor brake system is about 1890, plus or minus. So the first few years of trains around that time frame, you had brakemen who would run down the cars and put on handbrakes. The handbrakes on the train are full scale. This is the only one that should be connected. They learned the hard way the first year or so to disconnect the chains on the ones in the cars. Otherwise, people who were steering the cars were suddenly putting the brakes on. You may not know it, the squeals run along until you hit a joint and sparks fly at night, and you look at that. Why is there sparks? Oh, the brakes are on. They're dragging along. So, be more economical, help save the train. This also, some may disagree with me. We had a unique group of people that were train fans, like I mentioned Ken and Lou, that had it not been for them and the improvements, we might not still be here. Quickly about the trains, so there were 5 original ones. These are the first 2. King's Dominion came along 2 or 3 years later. Kerwin's in between the 2. The Dennis Spiegel and company, maybe not him personally, but that group of managers getting ready for King's Dominion asked the crew here, we're going to order 2 more. What did you learn from these that you don't want us to repeat or do want us to repeat? They said some of the colors should be darker, but most importantly to the engineer, this is a metal cab. Come August, and we've been running every day, you could probably fry an egg on the top of that thing. The King's Dominion cabs were wood, much more earth-friendly, people-friendly, and the steps were straight across on the cars. When the cars were built, I seen the build sheet. These are called Disney-style cars. When Ken Williams, Bert Williams, built the trains in Wayno, Pennsylvania, he designed the engines and Mrs. designed the cars. And these are Disney-style cars. Here we go. We're giving it to Fess Parker again. We're putting Disney cars on there. The ones at King's Dominion, though, are flat across. We frequently get, but have gotten people that used to work at King's Dominion who will come to see this. They're obviously not there anymore. The green one, the King's Dominion version, is at Busch Gardens, Tampa. There's some engines down there. I think 4 crowns they had last time I checked. The blue one is in Oklahoma at a camp, like a church camp, summer camp sort of a thing there. The Carowinds one, quickly, is sort of the really interesting one. It used to go sort of around the park. It went under the front entryway at Carowinds. When they took that out, 80s-ish, I think it was. It was bought by someone who went to Vermont. Shortly after that, it was bought by a mysterious buyer, probably a lawyer at that point, and it was shipped off to Iowa, where it went into a shop. The employees were sworn to secrecy about what was going on with that train. They weren't even allowed to tell their spouses what they were working on. Some months later, it started coming out, and you could see it because it went on a flatbed. It went in as number 2. It came out as number 1. It was painted in all super polished like a Disney engine. If you give it, those tend to be the apple green. Really polished with the name Catherine on the side. Well, when the cars came out, the cars said Neverland Ranch. So Michael Jackson bought one of our sibling engines, and was on Neverland Ranch. Last I heard, it was somewhere in the LA sort of area. So that's kind of a neat history. So that's where the rest of the five went. Let me, we got maybe 1 minute left. Any questions? Yes.
During winter fest, within an hour, when you do another round, can you briefly explain why?
There is, we've had some experience, 2005, but I'm one of the few people around. Dollywood also does a winter train, so we contacted them. I talked with Tim Smith down there. And it actually isn't the propane. You would think it was the propane after the earlier discussion. We use so much steam and there's so many exposed pipes. We use about 50 PSI just going from the station up to the top of the hill. In the summer, it's about 20 and 30 PSI drop on the boiler. The boilers are a little undersized from a heating surface perspective, but oversized from a capacity of steam holding perspective. And that's partially to keep it under the requirement for having a steam license, so parks can use them. So that takes a while for that to build back up. So I have an infrared temperature gun, so we've been taking measurements over that winter, finding the pipes that cooled off the most so that we could run steam to them or better insulate them so we have a better response time. I apologize for how long it took. Yes? These are oversized for a crown. These are 6-chime Nathans. This is the style you would find on a road engine back in the 1940s that you could hear from miles away. And one less. These things, if you can see these plates, different shapes, visualize the whistle. There's a nut very much on top, an outer shell. You pop that off, and you have the 6 steam openings. You have a variety of these, and you put them on there, and it changes the notes. If you had all the notes, it would sound like a calliope. They purposely sour notes on a steam locomotive so it doesn't sound like a calliope. And I offer to you the quick challenge. When you're listening to the steam engines, the 2 engines, we try to make them sound different. So listen to the whistles and listen to the pattern of whistles to figure out what train it is and where it is. Good. All right.
All right, let's hear it for Steve McBride. We hope you enjoyed the train tour. Thank everybody for waking up early. What we're going to do now is